All right. Good evening, good afternoon, and good morning to everyone, to our audience who are here. And today we are here to deliver our weekly session to talk about, to discuss on week topical issues in the continent, what's going on in Africa. Uh, so we have here our friend. Pan-Africanist Kwame Gonza. Welcome, Kwame.
Thank you very much, Mahlet. Thank you for having me. Greetings to all the viewers and all the people who are watching us across the continent of Africa and across the world. All those Africans who are watching us, and when we talk about Africans, we mean it in the sense of what Nkrumah referred to. The people Nkrumah referred to as Africans are all people of African descent, on the continent and those outside the continent, in North America, South America, all over. We consider those people Africans in the spirit of Pan-Africanism. So we thank you all for watching us and giving us support in this channel, Connect Africa. It's very few channels which are out here, defending our continent and speaking for our continent. And speaking about the political aspect. When we are talking about the political aspect, we are talking about power, because power is what influences any activities on the continent, whether it is economics, whether it is the social order of society. It is power, it is the political space. So it is only important that we as a people, as Africans, we learn to pay attention to institutions in our African society that are going to shape, our future and the future of our generations to come, the youth, our children and the grandchildren in the next, in the next 100 years or 200 years. So we want to appreciate you for being here. We would ask you that you share the channel with other people so that they can also, come here to learn and pay attention to the events that are going on around the world that affect, that affect our continent and affect us as a people, as African people on the continent and across the world. So thank you very much, very much, Mahlet, for organizing these sessions and these discussions and deliberations.
Thank you. Thank you, Kwame. Indeed, it's a pleasure. I always kind of a smile because you do that on behalf of the channel, and indeed, you're a family. Thank you very much, Kwame, for that. So, for today, we are going to cover actually what's happening in D.R.C, in South Africa. There is some kind of, that seems an organized kind of attack on the South African president, on the media. And then we're going to be touching quickly, we have covered it widely, the US Africa Summit, but over the weekend, there's an article that came that the US calling for the African Union to join G20. So we will be just touching on that. And also the visit that has been just concluded, the China Gulf meeting. So those are our topics for today. Tune with us. You will be learning a lot, because we really take time and prepare to bring knowledge, to share opinions, perspectives to you, so that you don't take, those mainstream put or push to you. That's why we are here, to give it a Pan-African perspective, to ask questions, what it means. Right on. So without further ado, we start with D.R.C. So just to give a bit of a background, D.R.C, just like most of African countries, has been just above 60 years since its independence we have two Congos. There's usually they are known as or referred with their capital. There is Congo Kinshasa and there's Congo Brazzaville. What we are talking about today is Congo Kinshasa, the D.R.C, Democratic Republic of Congo. So it, Congo, it's also divided by the river Zaire, actually. Like any other country, again, in the continent, it has been a victim of how do you call it, that European colonial knife that divided countries which should not be divided. So the two Congos are actually divided. One was occupied by Belgium, the other one by France. So D.R.C was under the Belgium colony, and then Republic of Congo, which is less problematic, as they call it, is less politically troubled, is the Republic of Congo. So D.R.C for solid 62 years has been in conflict, for solid 62 years. But of course, if you ask all those countries which are facing conflict, have natural resources, that's why actually they are put unrest, that they are put, you always hear some kind of rebels or secessionist groups are there. So this is what's happening in D.R.C for 62 years. So if you see, Congo is actually rich. It's the most, I think, number 3 in the production of diamond in the world. We have diamond, tin, copper, timber, cotton, magnesium, uranium, all those, precious minerals that you can name it. And then, the colonizers might have left physically, but they are there doing their job so that this rich country cannot use its own resource. Not only it cannot use its own resource, but also that other countries in the continent cannot use the resource, or in terms of trade or whatever, from D.R.C. D.R.C is so much poor in infrastructure, but if you see, per day, hundreds of private jets are flown from Brussels, Paris, from most of European countries, to loot these mineral resources. One might have asked, if for 62 years, if Congo has been, in conflict relatively during our forefathers' time, who founded actually the Organization of African Unity, have that Pan-African spirit better than the one we have right now of the 55 leaders. So how comes that, any sister or country in the continent did not try to solve this? That's why we have Kwame here, to give us indeed he will shed a light for us in terms of Ghana, which was under the leadership of Kwame Nkrumah at that time, what it did to solve the problem in D.R.C, and also in general, why this conflict is there for 6 decades. Kwame, the floor is yours. You're muted.
Thank you very much, Mahlet, for laying that background. It's very important that people get to have a bit of background with what is happening with the Democratic Republic of Congo. So the Congo, for us to be able to understand it, maybe I'll call you later. For the Congo, for us to be able to understand it, I think is important to go back as far as the formation of D.R.C as a modern state in itself. We are talking about 1958, when the Democratic Republic of Congo had started agitating for independence as far as 1958. when Nkrumah meets with the with the Prime Minister Patrice Lumumba, who was to become the Prime Minister, Patrice Lumumba of the Congo. But someone can also go as far as when the Europeans sat down to start carving up, the Democratic Republic of Congo, carving up the whole of Africa, and they even gave this territory to one man who was a brutal, dictator called Leopoldville from Belgium, to control this territory of Congo, and he killed more than 12 million people. He mutilated the people. He was very brutal and very greedy. He was a very greedy man. But we would not put all the blame on him. We would put it on all the Europeans, because it was this was their project of brutalizing Africa, the whole continent. And so Congo was a victim of this colonialism, which came first, because we can't only say that Leopold is the one who came up with this scheme. It is the Europeans, the whole European, community, which came up with this, project of colonization. But this is after slavery had failed. And as we saw, Haiti, had defeated them, and Haiti is the one which led to the failure of slavery as a project. So when the project of slavery was defeated by the Africans in San Domingo, which is the current day Haiti, then they went and crafted another project, which is colonialism, and so this is where we see that the Congo became a victim also of this project. Now, on top of that, is that the Congo has been looked at as the richest, acreage on the planet on planet Earth, with some people estimating that it has over $28 trillion in the ground of resources. Just to give people an understanding, not 28, actually, around 38 trillion. It is not 28. To give people an understanding, the United States economy is around $23 trillion. So, and they consider it the richest nation on earth. But the Congo alone has more than $38 trillion of resources in the ground. Our only Congo. So that means the whole of the rest of Africa, numerous resources. You go to countries like Zimbabwe, more than $18 trillion in the ground of resources. So we can talk and go on, but today, because we are concentrating on the Congo, let me stay on the Congo. So that colonialism is important for us to understand it, that these Europeans wanted to extract these resources, and build Europe. And lo and behold, they did, because they were able to extract rubber, they were able to extract numerous resources from the Democratic Republic of Congo, and they went on to build Belgium as we know it. That one man is the one who built up, Belgium. So they went and built Belgium as we see it. But even after independence, after independence, because from 1884 until 1958, up to 1960, when Congo would get its independence, all that time was extraction of material and extraction of people, from this territory to build up Europe. And that is the period which happened. And when the Africans rose up and started fighting, that they want their independence, the Europeans were not willing to let go. They still wanted a piece of this territory. And so they did whatever was necessary to hang on to the territory of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Now, we are speaking today about the Democratic Republic of Congo because this is a country which is still unstable even up to today. This is not to mean that the rest of Africa is stable. Okay, this is just to to say that the rest of Africa is relatively stable. Is not stable, but is relatively stable. But the Congo has never stabilized, especially the eastern part of Democratic Republic of Congo, those parts of Kivu, Katanga, and all those, those areas where there is numerous resources. So that is why we said we would dedicate, as you've made it clear, dedicate some time to understand the genesis of the problem. Up to today, we have chaos there, and that chaos, uh, when you put on the news today, the mainstream media has been attributed, to President Kagame and Rwanda. And as Pan-Africans, we came out and said that we want to understand this conflict. We want to understand this crisis. Did this crisis start yesterday? Did this crisis start today? Because President Felix Tshisekedi, who's the president of the Democratic Republic of Congo, he's accusing President Kagame of fueling conflict in the Democratic Republic of Congo, President Kagame of Rwanda. So when he accuses him, and we examine the problem of the Democratic Republic of Congo historically, do we still, conclude that Kagame or Rwanda is the problem? Of course, I understand that President Felix Tshisekedi has made it clear that the Rwandan people are not the problem, but he said the regime in Rwanda is the problem. So he has said that the Rwandan people are very friendly people, they are good people, but the regime which they have in Rwanda, is the problem according to him. And so President Kagame should leave Congo. So what we want to examine today, this problem in the Democratic Republic of Congo, is it really President Kagame the problem, or is the regime, the government in Rwanda the problem of the Democratic Republic of Congo? And that is why we went as far as 1884 at the division of Africa, when this territory was given to Belgium, and then Belgium gave one man who was a very brutal man, a murderous man who committed a lot of genocide in the Democratic Republic of Congo in the name of Belgium and British, and European colonialism, killed our people. So we wanted to understand why these people came here, and then give it a historical perspective, so that we can be able to dig the problem from the roots, instead of standing on the leaves on the roof and then saying this is the problem.
Yeah.
So that is why we decided to attack this problem from this perspective. So what we see is that after independence, uh, Nkrumah, Kwame Nkrumah of Ghana, understood very well the importance of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Even in one of his works, he said that Congo is the heart of Africa. If the Democratic Republic of Congo is not rescued, is not liberated from colonialism or Western domination, Nkrumah would go on to say that the rest of the African continent would not be free if we do not liberate Congo, if we do not take back Congo, into the control of the Africans, then Africa will not be free. Africa itself will not claim that it is free. It is a free continent, because this is where our major resources are, and is the heart of Africa, is in the center of the African continent. It's just at the center of the African continent. So if anyone controls this, this territory, then Africa will not be free. And so immediately in 1958, after the Pan-African Congress that happened in Accra, immediately President Nkrumah, hooked up with Patrice Lumumba, who was leading the independence movement in the Democratic Republic of Congo. They hooked up, and then they spoke at length, and Patrice Lumumba was very much inspired and he started admiring, Nkrumah because of the knowledge that he had about the continent, and then the fire that he had in him, and the love for the people, for the African people. So he started even taking advice from him on what to do, the next steps to take, you know. But all these things, as they were going on, the British, the Belgians, and the Americans were not willing to let go. They were really not willing to let go of the resources of the Democratic Republic of Congo, because they understood how important the resources that are coming from this, a part of Africa are to their development, to their industrialization.
Mm-hmm.
Just to give you a recap, even the bomb that was dropped on Nagasaki and Hiroshima, some people have said that the resources, the uranium, which was used to make that bomb, actually came from the Democratic Republic of Congo. So that is to give you just a snippet of how important the Democratic Republic of Congo. It is full of resources, as Mallet you have enumerated, in coltan, in tin, in manganese, and now today, in copper. Okay, and now today we have electric cars. And these electric cars, they are requiring us, to use. They are requiring us to use, a cobalt to make batteries. So, and we are seeing this trend is what is taking shape. We have seen Tesla, cars. We have seen, cars in China, BYD. We have seen all these, and majority of those resources are in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Even when you look all around the world, copper and cobalt, which are very important in the manufacture, and then coltan for the semiconductors, which are very important in the manufacture of these electronics. And all across the world, we have heard about computers and phones. Numerous of these resources are only found in the Democratic Republic of Congo. So this territory, the colonialists, they did not want to release this territory, and they did not want to let go of this territory because they understood the importance of this territory to their industrialization, even the rest of Africa. But they had particular interest here because of how important the Democratic Republic of Congo is to their industrialization. Companies like Boeing, Airbus, okay, Apple of today, IBM, okay, Dell Computers, all these companies have been built, with the extraction, from the extraction of resources. So it was important for them. They saw it as important to find all means of retaining the Democratic Republic of Congo as a source of raw materials for their industrialization. And this is in addition to South Africa. That is why actually in the 1980s and 1990s, they were in support of the apartheid regime. The United States supported the apartheid regime until the end, because resources used to flow like that from the Democratic Republic of Congo all the way to Rhodesia. The United States was supporting the Ian Smith regime and Britain, which all these were apartheid regimes. They wanted to impose them on Africans just to extract resources. Resources used to flow from Congo. You add resources in, which were flowing from Zimbabwe, and then from South Africa, and then they'll put them on ships and take
Yeah.
those resources. And that is why you see that even today, the United States and its European allies still have an interest in controlling this region, the eastern and southern part of Africa, because of the immense amount of resources that are here. And then we know, of course, of the trade route, on top of Ethiopia, the Gulf of Eden, and then the Suez Canal. We know all of these things. So they didn't want to release the Democratic Republic of Congo. Now, after independence, Nkrumah made sure to fight for the Democratic Republic of Congo. He sent in engineers in the Democratic Republic of Congo when the Belgians abandoned and destroyed everything, because this is the nature of the Europeans. They are envious that they didn't want the Africans. They did the same thing which they did in Guinea, Conakry, that They destroyed the French, they destroyed the railways, they even took out bulbs and they destroyed the documents. Even in Ghana, when they left, the British left after independence, they destroyed the documents because they are very envious people. They do not want to see the black man developing. So the same people who were saying that they are here to help the Africans, but when they were leaving, French destroyed the railways in Britain. I mean, in Conakry, in Guinea Conakry, the British burnt documents from Ghana. So it's the same thing which the Belgians were doing in the Democratic Congo, the Republic of Congo, because they were rejected. So they decided to take everything which they can, destroy documents. So Nkrumah had to bring all the help he would get from Ghana, because Ghana, remember, had started building up
Yeah.
capacity, starting I think around 1953. Ghana had started already, because that is when Nkrumah became head of government, starting around 1953, 1954. So Ghana had started building up capacity. So Nkrumah sent in the doctors, technicians, whatever was possible to help, the Prime Minister Lumumba to put together a government that would be able to run a functional civil service, that would be able to run a government. The Belgians, the British, and the Americans and their European allies, they felt that they could not allow this to happen. They felt that they could not allow these resources to go, into the control of Africans. So they immediately sprang into action. The CIA, as you know it, for those people who want to read this at length, you can consult Dr. Nkrumah's book, Challenge of the Congo. You can also consult another book called White Malice, was written by a lady, I think she's called I think Susan Mahlet. That book, I don't remember. White Malice, how the CIA's strategy of trying to recolonize Africa. White Malice, that is the book. It was written by one lady who is called Susan Williams, White Malice. So if you get it, maybe you can post the picture. You can also post it. So people who want to understand this, we are giving you this background because it is necessary for us to understand the conflict and the crisis in the Congo from a historical background. That is what we have emphasized. Nkrumah long grappled with this problem of the Democratic Republic of Congo. He came in to help, but he was not able to help enough, because the United States immediately used the United Nations, and they were able to arrest, the United Nations was able to arrest the Prime Minister Lumumba. And we know what happened next is that they killed the Prime Minister, Patrice Lumumba. And the same United Nations, remember, is the same United Nations that they wanted to use to destabilize Ethiopia recently. If you see these things, because these things, they repeat themselves. History repeats itself if you don't pay attention. That is why, as Africans, it is important for us to pay attention to history, because this history repeats itself, continuously repeats itself. And history will only repeat itself if you people who the history is trying to teach the lessons are not learning. Then it will keep repeating until you learn the lessons. So the crisis which we have seen and the rebellion we have seen in Ethiopia, this is not the first time for it to happen on the African continent. It has happened before in the Democratic Republic of Congo, that people were divided. We have on one side a guy called Kasavubu, and then we have the Prime Minister Patrice Lumumba. We have Maurice Shombe. We have people like Mobutu Seseko. So these were divided, and one side was being supported by the imperialists, the Belgians, the Americans, the British, and one side was supported by the Pan-Africanists, who were being represented by Dr. Kwame Nkrumah during that time. So the side of the imperialists outwitted the Pan-Africanists, and they took back, they took the Democratic Republic of Congo in their control. So this is the background. Now, when we come to today and what is happening in the Democratic Republic of Congo, is important for us to focus back and see, did this problem start today that is happening? Because President Felix Tshisekedi is accusing, President Kagame of taking Congo's resources, of extracting Congo's resources. And of course, on face value, when you look at it, it may be true. Okay, it may be true, and of course, when we say it may be, or if we say that it is not only President Kagame who is responsible for the crisis in the Democratic Republic of Congo, this does not mean that President Kagame or other regional countries like Uganda in the region do not have responsibility, do not have some responsibility or some accountability to take for the crisis in the Democratic Republic of Congo. I do believe personally that the Democratic Republic of Congo has faced a lot of problems, and the regional countries, Rwanda and Uganda, have some accountability to take. Like even the United Nations found Uganda in some way guilty for going into Rwanda and extracting some resources. But let us not forget that these are Africans. These are Africans, and they, for some reason, they went into the Democratic Republic of Congo, Rwanda, and Uganda. And when they reached there, they went for certain reasons which were not actually resources, because we remember that President Kabila, Laurent Kabila, was toppled from power for certain reasons, with the help of the Uganda army and the Rwandese army, and he was killed. And when he was killed, Uganda and Rwanda started fighting against each other in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And they were in those areas where there's mineral resources, and each of them started taking some of those resources. But what we want to say here is that the process of taking resources from the Democratic Republic of Congo did not start with that period. And behind them, these countries, when they were in the Democratic Republic of Congo, there was some very powerful forces. There were some very, very powerful forces, and those forces are historical. They have been historical, and majority of them, of the people who were there and taking some of the resources, especially the soldiers, when they had not gone there for the purpose of taking Congo's resources. Actually, some of them were taking the resources individually, not as official governments, as we may say. But even after that, Uganda, when it was found guilty by the United Nations, by the United Nations and the International Court of Justice, Uganda started paying some of the reparations. And even today, Uganda is building some roads in the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of Congo. And President Felix Tshisekedi, when he became president, I think he made a very important move, that he saw that to remove this problem, we need, we will need to enter into the East African community and be part of the brotherly community. I think that was a very strategic move. And I think that move, it should have further enhanced it. Because instead of isolating yourself and saying people are exploiting us, our brothers are exploiting us, or they're taking our resources which the imperialists definitely have been taking for centuries and centuries of years, I think it would be important to engage instead, and that is what President Tshisekedi did. That we need to enhance our strategy of engagement. So he entered the Democratic Republic of Congo in the East African community. Now, let us also be mindful that in the past, in the recent periods, even though President Kagame and Museveni have been working with the imperialists for some time for certain reasons, but in recent times, these people have become sort of they have become sort of cold. They have developed cold feet towards serving the neo-colonial agenda. And as Pan-Africanists, I think what I would want us to do is sometimes to be pragmatic, to be as pragmatic people and understand when there's change in the temperature on the continent, change in the moves and what is going on in the continent. And so when there's a change in relationship between the government in Kigali and the West, then they start criticizing, Kagame, as we have seen, they are criticizing him. Why does it, he increase his stay in power? Criticize Museveni. Why does he stay, for very long in power? And we see Museveni also criticizing them. So as Pan-Africans, I think who want the continent and looking at the continent for the next 100 years or 200 years and 500 years, I think when we read moods like this, we need to take advantage of this and see how we can benefit the whole African continent, from moods like this. So what am I driving at here? So what I'm seeing in this situation is that these two people, President Kagame and President Museveni, have been for a long time working with these Western people, for certain reasons, which have angered actually even the Pan-Africans and all the African people on the continent. But of recent period, they had started, resisting, the moves of the West. And so the West also decided to show that they are the controllers of the world. So they want to see how they can divide, the region. Even the idea of the East African community, the Congo entering into the East African community, it brought some fear. Actually, it brought in some sort of new fear in the Western world. If you look at it, carefully, that they were terrified that the East African community might be a problem to the project of the neo-colonial, project. Now, President Tshisekedi himself, I believe that he's doing certain mistakes, which I believe that he should not be doing. Instead, he should be continuing the strategy of engagement which he started when he came to power. He started with the strategy of engaging the region. But if he turns around and starts criticizing the government in Rwanda, then he's putting a crack into the East African community, which he joined himself. This is what I see. And when I see the East Africa regional force that has been deployed in the Democratic Republic of Congo, I believe that this is the solution. This is the African solution, I think, that we have been looking for. And the African Union itself should, enhance these efforts. The African Union should rather increase also its engagement, in the Democratic Republic of Congo and bring these leaders together and even reduce the friction and throwing words, because we hear President Tshisekedi throwing words to Kigali, and then Kigali also throwing words back and saying they are doing this, they are intimidating, creating a state of chaos because he wants to, extend the elections, stuff like that. That is what Kigali has been saying. And then President Tshisekedi also will throw words towards Kigali. So I think that this, we need, to stop it. And the African Union needs to be at the center of doing this, needs to be at the center of bringing these people together, tirelessly. It is not easy, but it needs to make, continuous effort. And we can use, I think, the efforts of people like Prime Minister Abiy, who has been going through a crisis. And if we bring him, in the Prime Minister Abiy, I think he can also advise, because he could talk to these people and tell them that we have also been through this kind of crisis, even though it has been internally. But these are problems which we can solve within ourselves. And he has experience in solving these problems in an African way, instead of taking our problems as Africans to the UN and calling in Europeans. And these Europeans who have been historically, the major cause of these problems, because for them they celebrate when we have these problems in the region. So this, for me, is my outlook on the problem, in the Congo. I believe that if we go, if we want to talk about it, we can even talk about it until tomorrow. But
Yeah.
I think let us try to summarize it,
Yeah.
briefly, so that we can leave it there.
Thank you very much, Kwame. Indeed, of course, it's a 62 solid 62 years conflict, and you tried to give us, a background on that in 20 something minutes, which is really, yeah, I know the time is very short. We can talk about it all night long, all week long, but it's important, it's for the audience perspective. Uh, how do you say it? Context is everything. We really need to understand the context whenever they try to step in, them meaning the West, the US led West. uh, there is something that we need to question. So that's really the important thing. It's important that you gave us that background and what Kwame tried. Even that actually brought the friction between Kwame and the US, and which gradually led to his assassination later on through CIA. So some of the points that you mentioned, of course, Leopold, that he massacred 12 million people, and I wonder why the AU uh, cannot say this is a Holocaust, an African Holocaust. How many people the Jews have been killed by the Nazis? 6 million people. I mean, 12 million people. And the thing is, the Belgians still, they do not apologize for that. As far as I have been once for a meeting like some years ago in Brussels, and there was this guy from their foreign ministry, which actually he just continued to talk about what Belgium did this and that to Congo, but never admitted that they did what they did, for D.R.C. to be the way it is today. And they are so arrogant. And the amount that you say that D.R.C. is sitting on, $38 trillion, which is above the American 23 trillion dollar assets. And another thing that I picked is, of course, what makes this different from the conflict of other countries in the continent is the regional actors are involved in it. Yes, as you said, we cannot completely say that Rwanda, Kagame is clean from this, because they also become diamond exporters next to Congo. So from where that comes from, it's a question. But I like what you said, what you gave us, that President Tshisekedi said, the Rwandan people. It's important because people have never been in conflict. People, all they know, or is from ancient times. They know how to cohabit. They know how to live together. So it's always important to make a division, to draw that line between a government and then the people, because that will help. At the end of the day, these people live together. If something happens, they go to a neighboring country. So we need to draw that the people are not an enemy. It's really, I mean, it might be taken lightly, but I don't take it lightly, because I have seen also how Israeli and Palestine actually live together. All we see is that this sexiest headline that is thrown to us by the mainstream media, but these people actually, there are activities they do together. um, the Eastern African community, yes, it's just few months ago that Congo D.R.C. was welcomed in the community. Now that we have this war of words between the two leaders, but again, I really, really admire you for bringing that up. That President Tshisekedi have to engage the leaders instead of alienating them, because this is exactly what Prime Minister Abiy did when the son of the Ugandan leader went on Twitter and did what the damage that it has done. In return, diplomatically, Ethiopia has engaged the Ugandan government, and that's the end, the sun, and even with some convoy visited Ethiopia, and he kind of neutralized it. So that's really important. If you continue to alienate, that's exactly what the West wants you, and then they step in the name of peace negotiating, and then they will start to be not from the observer, they upgrade themselves from mediator, and then controlling the whole thing. So things will go, Ethiopia, I mean, the past 2 years has been really an exemplar thing if we can learn. And yes, as you said, Prime Minister Abiy, he has reached out to Eritrea and sent that the olive branch, as they call it, and made a peace. And then he actually, when Sudan was on the brink of failing, he made, and he traveled and actually made a peace. That's why still, whatever we have, we still TPLF operating in Sudan, but the Sudanese people have really this good opinion about, in general, about the leader in Ethiopia, and then the people. So that's really important. That's how we have to keep a peace between people. It's really important. Now let's move to South Africa. It seems recently President Cyril Ramaphosa's administration seems to be in turmoil, as per my reading from different articles. So one article I quote, it says, a panel found that he may have violated South Africa's constitution following the theft at least $580,000 at a farm he owns. So, and they say this possibly could lead to his resignation, but of course the spokesperson came out and said that he is not going to resign. Now, notwithstanding with what happened in the background before he came a president of South Africa, because there are also other things when he was a president of South Africa's biggest trade union, the National Union of Minerals, mine workers, actually. So there were some allegations, and then now this. But we want to focus currently against what backdrop this is coming out, what's going on, why this is coming now. So we have seen his involvement in solving, when he was the president, when he was the chairman for 1 year for AU, trying to solve the GERD conflict, and then also in negotiating the peace, one of the three, Olusegun Obasanjo, South Africa, and then Kenya, Uhuru Kenyatta. We have seen this and other things that are he engaged in Pan-African activities, sticking to that principled position of Pan-Africanism. So help us to understand why this is coming. And you seem, from your article you published also, we will share that to you on the channel for the audience, which you seem to draw a similarity what's happening in D.R.C. and in South Africa, could be the same. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mahlet, for elaborating further on those points, or on especially the Democratic Republic of Congo. One thing which I want people to understand, first of all, is that Pan-Africanism has always been looked at as an enemy of European imperialism, racism, colonialism, slavery, and neocolonialism to date. So the reason why the Americans fought Marcus Garvey and threw him out of the United States after him organizing more than 4 million Africans in the United States is because he was demonstrating that spirit of Pan-Africanism, self-determination for the Africans. The reason why Haiti has been punished and for the last 200, 300 years, is because Haiti defeated France as a power, defeated Britain, defeated Haiti would go on to defeat even Spain, as a nation. And so we can go on and on. The reason why Nkrumah was overthrown from power in 1966, it goes all the way to the events of what happened in the Democratic Republic of Congo. And what is this? Is because these people were true Pan-Africanists who were demonstrating the spirit of Pan-Africanism. And the spirit of Pan-Africanism or Pan-Africanism in itself as an ideology demands that as Africans we come together and start working together. And it demands that we are independent people as Africans. The spirit of Pan-Africanism demands that we are respected as Africans by the rest of the world. And so this is the spirit that has been very scary,
Yeah.
and it is always fearful. So Pan-Africanism is always looked at as an enemy of Western exploitation. The white man, white supremacy, racism, colonialism, slavery, all these evils that the white man always transforms, into one way or another in order to continue to exploit, especially the African people on the continent and those in the diaspora, as we are seeing George Floyd dying. So if there was a strong African state, united African state, you would not see George Floyd dying in the streets, because we would be respected. We would be respected as a people, as African people. So whenever we see that spirit of Pan-Africanism manifesting anywhere on the continent or anywhere in the world, then they look at it as an enemy. So what do? They go in there to try to dismantle any group of people that are coming together and expressing themselves and manifesting that spirit of Pan-Africanism. And so this is what we are seeing that also is happening actually in the Democratic Republic of Congo. In the past, I've said that the president of the Democratic Republic of Congo, I think he needs to be careful and read this situation very well and put it in the historical context, because it is likely that the enemy of Pan-Africanism may be working to dismantle the East African community. Because remember, in 2021, when Congo had just ascended to the East African community, I think it was October or November, 2021, 2021. Immediately we had some so-called attacks in Kampala. It was just a few days after the Congo had been allowed into had ascended into the East African community, to be part of the East African community. Those bombings happened in Kampala, and some people died, which was very unfortunate. But some of us suspected that there was sabotage. There was planned sabotage, even though some people said it was some sort of terrorist group, some terrorist people, group of terrorists, who have been terrorizing Uganda and stuff like that. ADF groups who are residing in the, in the Eastern Congo. That's what was the suspect. Now we see that from that, efforts are being made to destabilize or to separate member states of the East African community. The Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda. We see them at loggerheads with each other.
Mm-hmm.
But then we see Blinken in the Congo, visiting the Congo, and Biden, whispering in the Congo of in the ears of President Tshisekedi. So this makes us suspect that the enemy of Pan-Africanism could be at work, because he feels that he doesn't want to lose the Democratic Republic of Congo, and so he will do everything possible to stay on top of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Now, I've mentioned that because I'm coming to the issue of South Africa. I'm coming to President Cyril Ramaphosa and his work. Now, the other thing which I want our people to understand is that for us to work as a people, as Africans, to fight for our cause, to fight for the cause of Pan-Africanism, it doesn't need you to be perfect. Okay, you don't need to be a perfect, blameless person. I know people like President Cyril Ramaphosa have their problems and weaknesses. People like President Kagame have their problems and weaknesses. People like President Seven have their problems and weaknesses.
Yeah.
But this does not mean that they cannot do right on the side
Yeah.
of Pan-Africanism. Now, I'm coming to President Cyril Ramaphosa. President Cyril Ramaphosa has his weaknesses as a person, maybe internal weaknesses in the country, as you know, Azania or the so-called South Africa. There is problems in the country. Okay, you know, we have heard of the load shedding, the recent load shedding
Yeah.
that has happened, that is disturbing the country, and many other things. The unemployment, you know, we have heard of these problems. But on the other side, let us also not forget that some of these countries have a leadership role on the continent. So it is important not only to look at the president who has the weakness, but to also look at the leadership of the country itself. Look at the presidency, because the presidency is different from the individual. So the position the president himself is occupying is different from his individuality as a person with weaknesses. So when this person is occupying that position and is representing South Africa, and he is doing his foreign policy, for example, recently, has been one of the best on the African continent. And I believe that is one of the reasons that Joe Biden invited Cyril Ramaphosa to South Africa, because South Africa had taken on the South African presidency, or and the ANC put together, because Cyril Ramaphosa is, you know, is a representative of the African National Congress. He has been looked at as a leader on the continent due to certain moves that he, you know, had started making on the continent. You remember that when Senator Blinken came out from Asia to give his speech, or the speech of President Biden's strategy
Yeah.
on Africa, they gave it in South Africa and Pretoria.
Yeah.
Why was that? So after that, they invited President Cyril Ramaphosa to Washington. Okay, they invited him to Washington, President Cyril Ramaphosa, and Biden had these discussions, with the President Cyril Ramaphosa, and after that, when he came back, we have seen that important events like the negotiations, the African Union itself also decided to take the negotiations of the rebellion that was happening in the northern part of Ethiopia, in the Tigray region, to South Africa. So there is a certain reason that the presidency of South Africa had assumed a certain leadership position on the African continent. And so that is why it is being looked at this way. So that is where I plead with my brothers and sisters in South Africa, that when they are looking at this situation and looking at the weaknesses of the presidency, of the president as an individual, they also need to be patient and look at the whole continent and understand the role that is being played by the presidency of South Africa on the whole African continent. Because if we move in a certain way as South Africans, and we jeopardize, we sabotage the interests of the African continent, it will not only be us as a continent that would lose, but all of us, even including South Africa, will lose. So that is where we have been saying that people have to be slow, in their, reproaching the president, and trying to attack him, in a certain way. We see that, the Minister of Foreign Relations, or Minister of International Relations, Madame Naleda Pandor, also, when Blinken came there, she was able to stand up against him with his bullying, which he had, brought. They have been able to stand up against a bill in the United States Congress, a bill called HR 7311. That bill South Africa has been able, is the only country on the African continent I've had stand up to that bill. All the other African countries have not said anything. I've not heard anything. So South Africa has taken on that position of trying to lead the continent. So when the president is leading, I think that we need to give him a benefit, what they call a benefit of a doubt, so that he can do certain good things for the African continent. In addition to that, we see that the president was recently invited by the monarch in Britain, the king, Charles, in Britain. So it shows you that South Africa right now is occupying a certain enviable position on the African continent. And I would beg again my South African brothers and sisters not to lose that privileged position which the world has pushed them into, that they should be able to occupy that position without, sabotaging, the work that the president is doing. I believe that because of this and South Africa's position on the continent and the way it has stood against this Western bullying, I solidly believe that there may be some sabotage, because he sold this, what they are calling that is corruption. There's no corruption that the president did. The president said that he sold his animals from his farm and someone paid the money, paid him the money. But then what happened is that the money was stolen. So the case that the president is being accused is not reporting the money that was stolen. Okay? He's being accused. Why did he not report the money that was stolen on his farm? So maybe he has reasons, why he didn't mention these things. So then they should wait for him to come up with his party and his lawyers so that he can explain himself. So he has not committed. There's no anywhere where there is money that they are saying money got lost, from the bank, and they found it in the president's, in the president's house. So that is not the case. So that is why we are saying that it is possible that this, it could be a sabotage against the president, who has been already doing a good work around the African continent. And we as Africans, I think that we need to move slowly in certain matters, when especially the interests of our continent as a whole are at stake. So this is what I see with the crisis in South Africa. When it comes to the foreign policy of the foreign policy of the South African government, and the ANC in general, I believe that there is a lot of work that has to be done internally. Like we said, the power crisis that South Africa is going through. But at the same time, I believe that the South African government and the ANC has had a very, very, wonderful, very constructive foreign policy with regards to the African continent.
Thank you very much, Kwame, for that. I really, want to highlight on some things that you have said. Yes, how do you say it? Their individuality and their role, or their role in in the countries that they lead, and also their role in Africa, in the continent, sometimes could be different. And so we need to give them that benefit of the doubt. And for real, we audience, we just who consumes the news as it is, we really, really have to question it. That's actually the main thing, that why we are trying to analyze the way we analyze issues here. Yes, South Africa stood against the HR 7311, and then South Africa for a long time has been, against the occupation of Israel, of Palestine. And then recently we have seen their role also, even if we take Ethiopia, he played really an important role in bringing that talk. Of course, the prime minister approached the African President Cyril Ramaphosa, and then when he was president for 1 year of the or the chairman of the African Union, so he was able to bring that to the African Union in sticking to that principal position of African solution to African problem. And really, I have to give it to the Minister of Foreign Relations, Madame Naleda Pandora. I remember really there is one thing that she said. I don't know if we have paid attention when on 2nd of November, when that peace deal was signed, she said, really, she was really narrating it, telling it very slowly so that we get it. Um, as we remember, I mean, this was not on the news, but this thing, for the first person that was chosen to lead this peace talk representing South Africa was Madame Zuma, but Madame Zuma, for some reasons, were not there or couldn't take it. So it was this lady, the Minister of Foreign Relations, that Cyril Ramaphosa called her. This is what she said in her own words. He called her to her office, to his office, and when he told her, this is a duty that we should respond, that we have to respond to this duty, meaning South Africa has to be there, because not many of them didn't want to take part. As they think that if they are part of this, that their relation with the US or whatever could be troubled. So he said this is a duty that we have to respond, meaning being part of or facilitating this peace talk for Ethiopia. And that was real. I take it heavily. And when she narrated, you know how women are and how, that motherly talk, that leadership talk, it was really, really, it hit me. So it showed the commitment of South Africa, but more than anything, the commitment of its leadership for this peace talk to make it happen, because there was a lot of hands that wanted to put their hands into this and not to make it work. So I just want to share to show you one picture that was right after that November the peace deal, the COP27, the summit on climate change happened in Sharm el Sheikh in Egypt. And I really, so this is what during the GERD talk, when he was engaging both Egypt and Ethiopia, and then this is it looks like, kind of we did it kind of picture. We made the peace, we brought it, we implemented. This is my translation, don't take me wrong, this is how I perceived it. So I just wanted to share that. So moving it to the next topic of our discussion is the US call for the African Union to join G20. This is what Washington Post published, was I think on Saturday or Sunday, just before ahead of the US Africa summit. So you help us now to try to understand. What we know is that we wanted to be part of, Africa wanted to be part of the United Nations Security Council. Now, ignoring that, they're talking about G20. What is the benefit that Africa will get by being a member of G20? And then why is this like a kind of a setup, a diversion from that? And actually, there is no free lunch, as we know, from the West. So what in exchange? They are already talking about, getting a vote on Ukraine-Russia crisis. So please, help us to understand. Back to you, Kwame.
Thank you very much, Mahlet. Actually, as you've mentioned, South Africa has really done a lot. And one of the things actually which they have done is that President Cyril Ramaphosa he was recently in Kenya and he has had conversations with President William Ruto on merging, on the idea of merging uh, Kenya Airways also with the South African Airways. We know that they have been those airlines have been going through some challenges, but also it is important to make it a Pan-African airlines. So these are some of the achievements and the discussions that have been going on. These are some of his very, very important achievements as a government and his administration. I think that these are very important, and we need to, applaud when applaud is needed. We need to give credit where credit is due. And so it's very important. Now, to comment on the U.S. Africa relations, an article came out recently. I think it was in Reuters and the Washington Post and those mainstream media, outlets that actually this is what definitely President Biden, plans to do. They say that President Biden is going to say or emphasize or put out there to the during the Africa Summit, U.S. Africa Summit, that he is pushing for the inclusion of Africa into the G20 so that they can make it into G21. What is G20? G20 is some of the biggest economies in the world, 20 of the biggest economies in the world. Actually, South Africa is already part of the G20 as countries, but they want to include Africa as a continent so that it can be G21. As we have seen, Europe also is present, but at the same time, there's German and France and I think and Britain also. They are part of that, even though they are part of the European Union. So Africa also could be there, and then we also have South Africa inside as part of the G20. So from there, it could become a G20, G21. And the G20 as an organization which was formed on to discuss economic issues of the world, especially because this was the major reason why the G20 was formed, especially after the economic crisis that have happened, economic crises that have happened in the past. So it was formed to solve those, and then these days also to discuss issues of climate change, which issues are already being handled by the United Nations. The United Nations already has arms handling this. When you are talking about discussing economic issues, we have already the International Monetary Fund, we have the World Bank is there, and then we have the United Nations. So what I see for me, from my perspective, is just a duplication and a duplication of activities or duplication of efforts. And I think to a certain extent, it could be a camouflage. It is camouflaging or confusing Africans, to abandon their demands, legitimate demands or constructive demands. Because remember, from the 1960s, we have demanded a seat at the United Nations Security Council, permanent seat at the at the United Nations Security Council, starting with Kwame Nkrumah. Kwame Nkrumah is the one who started with the demand of a seat at the United Nations Security Council, permanent seat for the African continent. And so this has gone on even with the generation of President Mugabe, even up to the generation of leaders like the Nana Addo and all the other leaders who have, who are around even up to today, that we have been demanding for a seat at the United Nations, Security Council, a permanent seat. Actually, two seats which we have been demanding, and to think that they are considering Brazil and India for a seat at the United Nations Security Council permanent, a permanent seat for India and Brazil are not considering Africa, and then they are talking about giving Africa a representation at the G20, I think that this becomes a distraction. I think as Africans, we need to stay on course. We need to stand, because we need to stand and be firm in our demand so that we are not wavering. Because if we go on and accept something which I believe is not bad, it's not bad if we accept it, but we need to emphasize that we need to get a seat at the United Nations Security Council first before we get a seat at the G20, because this is where the real decisions are made. If you are talking about economic decisions, we should ask for more powers in the in the IMF and the World Bank, because this is where the money is. This is where the fate, the economic fate of the world is decided from. It's not decided at the G20. It's decided in these organizations. We need to have more say at the World Bank. We need to have more say in the International Monetary Fund. We need to have more say at the United Nations. So when we are talking about G20, and then which is coming with a lot of conditions, of course. In the article which was published, they mentioned that the reason they are mentioning these lukewarm concessions which they want to give to Africa, or these weak concessions, is because they did not receive Africa's cooperation during the sanctions on Russia, the condemning of Russia. And this is somewhat to suggest that Africans are stupid. They don't know how to choose, what is good for them. Africa knows how to choose what is true for it, what is good for it. Nobody is choosing for Africa. So when they make bills like the HR 7311, which bill is intended to humiliate Africa and to show that the West can choose for Africa, can decide how Africa chooses its friends, so that Africa doesn't have to have relations with Russia, because that bill is aimed at Russia. They called it Russia's maligning, activities in Africa, countering Russia's maligning activities in Africa. There's no maligning activities in Russia. I mean, in Africa, Russia's maligning activities in Africa. There's no such thing. So this is arrogancy of the West, and I think that that is why Madame Naledi Pandor stood up against. That is why South Africa stood up against it and said that this is humiliating and it will be unfortunate and is disrespectful. Okay, it is disrespectful for to the African people. It's similar to making bills in the European Union Parliament and saying we should not go ahead with the pipeline. Is arrogant, is racist. First of all, is neo-colonialist. We are not Europeans. We are Africans. How can you stand in the European Parliament and you make rules for us? But make rules for us as Africans is absolutely arrogant and unacceptable. And I think that if it needs us to have a rough discussion and a confrontation with these people, that is the only way they will understand. I think we need to have it. We need to have this serious conversation about our sovereignty as Africans. So when we talk about the G20, that they want to give us that, which I think is not that significant. It's not a significant position, even though we may go in there and say here and there. We don't need to give concessions as Africans, and especially those concessions which affect our sovereignty, which impinge on our sovereignty as African people and affect us as African people. So this is how I would look at this idea of G20. We need to insist on getting 2 permanent seats at the United Nations Security Council with full veto powers, not in the sense in which arrogant Macron, the president of France, was suggesting that they should give us, but without the veto powers. Whatever he was saying, that they should check. Actually, he said they should check how those veto powers will be used. We have not been checking how the United States and Europeans and whoever who gave themselves veto powers, which are not democratic, it is dictatorship. It is run on dictatorship. The United Nations Security Council has been run on dictatorship for a very long time, and we have not been saying anything. So now we are saying that you people are the ones who are making noise around the world about democracy. Let everything be democratized. Let the IMF be democratized. Let the United Nations Security Council be democratized. And you are making noise and telling us that how you want to tell us how we will use the veto powers, because Africa has not been in a position where it has brutalized anyone, around the world, where it has supported racism, where it has supported apartheid, like what we are seeing, in Israel. It has supported colonialism. Africa has always been on the good side of history. If it has anything, it is supporting of freedom for the people, independence. And we have always fought, with other people hand in hand against brutality that was meted on us with, by colonialism, slavery, and all these. So I believe that Africa is in a very good position to exercise and use the veto powers. Actually, if anybody, it is Africa who would be able to use those veto powers in a more responsible manner compared to other nations which have been, violating even the United Nations Charter.
Yeah, thank you, Kwame, for that. Indeed, if there are two main things that why they should not leave this continent alone, is this one is the free markets that uncontrolled that they have in and out in the continent, and then also the voting power that Africa has in the United Nations. It's 55 votes, and that's if we use it and if we value that, it's big. Yeah, so the last topic for today is actually we can quickly touch upon it, the just concluded China Gulf meeting which comes just before the US Africa summit. It's a historical first time meeting, and it's not happening, unlike US Africa, it's not happening in China. Actually, it's happening in the Gulf states, in Saudi Arabia. And the president of China, has received a majestic welcome by the Saudi prince, or by the Saudi king, and all eyes and ears are were on in Saudi Arabia, and actually they have actually concluded a deal, a trade deal between the two, which is really, you know, US until recently, US and Saudi were an ally, and we know what they did to Yemen together. And but after what happened to Russia, then they were trying to get more oil deal from Saudi, which Saudi refused. Of course, there is no free thing. When Saudi sell its energy, US brings on the table weapon. That's what they have been doing, all military things. But now China is stepping in with what actually Saudi wants, meaning technology. So, in exchange of the energy or the oil that it gets from Saudi, we might not necessarily have to dive in, what they are dealing or something, but what Africa can learn from this. How can we relate it to our cause? You're muted, Kwame.
Thank you very much, Mahlet. I think is important to remember that we have been talking about these things, how the world is changing for a very long time. I think since last year, we have been saying that the world is changing. The world is changing, and that change is being reflected. We saw the United States withdraw from Afghanistan, and of course, that withdrawal was for the purpose of focusing on China and then fighting Russia. And Russia saw this definitely, to try to fight Russia and fight China over the control, of course, of the African continent. We have seen that they have been slandering China and spreading propaganda about China all over the world. banning RT news in Africa so that Russia cannot tell its story to the Africans. We have seen all these things. So it is a neo-colonial strategy to continue the colonial process. And so for China, it is only right that it makes these moves, because remember, the United States withdrew from Afghanistan after 20 years. And after destroying that area, it withdrew and even seized and stole money from the Afghani people, $7 billion, which has not been returned, which is a very unfortunate situation, because Russia and China have called for the United States to return this money, and they have still insisted that they will not return the money. So these are thieves that we are dealing with. So when you have allies in a region, those allies also, at a certain level, they come to feel your inconsistency. They will come to realize your inconsistency, even though the United States established its relations with Saudi Arabia way back during the Roosevelt times, President Theodore Roosevelt in the 1940s. But they have not been consistent. Saudi Arabia, it has a continuing leadership. And when you go to the United States, they are always changing, every now and then. Before even Trump's 8 years were completed, Trump was removed from power, and Trump was very friendly to the kingdom in South Africa. I mean, in Saudi Arabia, was very friendly to to the kingdom, the kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Biden, in one of his speeches, he said he would make Saudi Arabia a pariah state. And so the leadership in South Africa did not feel very good about this type of language towards a nation that has been historically friendly. And on the other side, they also abandoned Afghanistan, and also they have attempted to stop giving them help, for the continuation, the bombing in Yemen and South Africa, Saudi Arabia. Sorry, I always confused because I'm very used to South Africa. So Saudi Arabia is in Yemen, has been carrying out a campaign in Yemen because the government, which it doesn't agree with, was trying to come to power. And so the other thing is that the United States is facing a lot of problems at home, okay, majorly economic problems, and and Saudi Arabia is becoming richer and richer. The United States also went ahead to say that they are going to be self-reliant when it comes to oil, so they are not the major, importer of Saudi Arabian oil right now, and yet they depend on Saudi Arabia's ability to sell its oil in dollars and support the dollar as the reserve currency of the world. So this is how Saudi Arabia looks at the situation, sees the waning power of the United States and the whole Western world, and sees that they are declining. And we ourselves as Pan-Africans, we have been saying this for a very long time, that these people are declining. And so we need to get our act together as Pan-Africans and also start organizing our people and move in a certain way. So what you are seeing in Saudi Arabia, that is the Arab, the China, the China GCC summit is about the Arabs organizing themselves, reorganizing themselves. It's them recognizing that a new power has arrived on the scene and a new world order is being shaped. So this is the reorganizing that is going on in the Arab region. And so that is why it's important also with us also as Pan-Africans, especially, who are tasked with the responsibility of shaping the continent and giving it a new direction, to also start having these dialogues with ourselves and our people and organizing our people for the new direction where we want our continent to go. And this may include the African civil society. It may include all the Pan-Africans. It may include the progressive governments, like we have identified certain groups, which can contribute to this cause. and we have to have a new dialogue within ourselves and say, where do we want now our continent to go now that the world is changing? A new world order is being birthed. Where do we want our continent to go? So this is what I see with Saudi Arabia's gestures. They signed a lot of contracts, and even on infrastructure, on energy. uh, uh, you know, President Xi, China has already built a high-speed train which goes even up to 350 kilometers per hour in Saudi Arabia from Mecca to Medina. So they have already done a lot. They have signed contracts on culture. In Saudi Arabia, they have already started teaching Chinese as a language. And so they did a lot of things. They signed a lot of contracts together, and they're working together. So they opened the space for cooperation, with each other, because they are seeing now that China is now the biggest importer of Saudi Arabian oil. So Saudi Arabia attaches importance to that, because the United States went out to say that it is now a net exporter of hydrocarbons. So it's no more now the biggest importer of Saudi Arabian Saudi Arabian oil. So Saudi Arabia sees that in a different way. On the other side, we see that President Xi actually mentioned it openly and said that Saudi Arabia should start accepting the yuan instead of the dollar. They should start transacting for oil in the yuan currency. So this should show you openly that the world has changed, that what they killed Gaddafi for, President Gaddafi for, because he was suggesting that Africa should sell its resources in gold. What they killed Saddam for, because he was suggesting that he should sell his oil in euros. Now it can be said openly, okay? And they cannot go and attack China and kill, President Xi Jinping, because China is a powerful country. But what we can expect from there is that they will continue to attack China. They will continue to slander China, talk about Xinjiang. They say that China is carrying out a genocide in Xinjiang and all those things. They will continue to and attack China. But Africa, what it can learn from this, I think, is that we have to learn that the world is changing and we have to get our act together. The other thing is that when these imperialists are somewhere, we have also to understand, because they are not going to fall in one day. Their empire is not going to fall in one day and get destroyed. It will be, these declines will be incremental. It will be a process. But we have to understand that if also we develop rapidly and reach the level China has reached, we may face the same challenges with these imperialists that China is facing. So this is what I see as an African. And I think we need to pay attention to all these events that are going on when the United States and the Western world, they are trying to stay on top of the world, because at the end of the day, they are all fighting for the African continent to retain our resources and prevent us from industrializing and developing our people as Africans.
Indeed, true. Yeah, their existence is based on our failure or on on destabilizing Africa, so that they can use all resources, including manpower. By the way, so we need to act to get our acts together and align ourselves which direction we should go. So thank you very much. We have been able to cover four big topical issues that are related to Africa one way or the other, except sport or the football. But that can be still ahead of us, so that can be for another day. Thank you very much, Kwame, as usual. Definitely, and the audiences who have been here, it have been an hour and a half, just a little bit more than an hour and a half. Yeah, thank you very much for those of you. We will always, we will have a weekly session. We try to make it actually on Thursday, but sometimes when something happens, we can do it Monday or Tuesday. So yeah, tune in, be a family, and get those discussions, and there's definitely something that you can take, and at least we can provoke you to read, to go and check for yourself. That's a big achievement for us, and to look at things from the African perspective. Everything that is happening in the world should be looked at from the Pan-African perspective. That's what we are trying to create here. Yeah, and have a good evening, everyone. And thank you, Kwame, once again. Bye
Thank
bye.
you very much, Mahlet. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
And thank you for everyone who was watching to be able to, to understand, uh, as we share what is happening with the world and what is happening within our continent. We want to thank you. Sign up, like and comment down here. Give us your thoughts and give us some of the topics you think that we should be discussing on this channel going forward. Because, like we said, this is the only channel where we discuss real African issues that are going to affect our continent going forward in the next 100, 200, and 500 years. So this is the only channel where you will find people discussing issues that are going to affect us as a people, as Africans. So it's better that you do the supporting, and then we'll continue to share, and then we will take on even the ideas which you have and comment in the section. So I want to thank you very much, Mahlet.
Yeah, thank you. Good that you mentioned, because somebody commented the other day when we were discussing. It was not the US Africa Summit, the one before that, actually, to talk for us to talk about about DRC. So I hope we have given you enough analysis. So yeah, thank you. And yeah, I put Africa Reimagined. So yeah, be a family of Connect Africa, and at the same time, Africa Reimagined. Africa Reimagined is, I will put a link. For now, I just put the name. This is a YouTube channel of Kwame. You get, I mean, just check all the videos that he posted. It's really so many interesting things that you can learn from it. So yeah, have a good evening. Bye bye. Until next time.
Bye bye.